Welcome back to the Weber State Democrats Podcast. Today we have a very special guest in the Vice Chair of the Utah Democratic Party, Oscar Matta. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
I'm Lincoln, he, they.
I'm Jude, they, she, I guess.
I'm Ethan Bishop, and I'm the president of the WSU Democrats. We're going to start off with a few questions for Oscar, and if you guys want to jump in, if you guys have any questions or anything you want to add. So I just kind of wanted to ask about kind of the power of the vice chair. What exactly does the vice chair do? I mean, if you're explaining this to someone who just, has no clue in that department. And why is this position critical to the party's success here in Utah?
Very short explanation is my job. I spend 2 years. That's the duration of my term, but I spend 2 years to help get Democrats elected and push Democratic policies. So we recruit candidates, we raise money for candidates, we raise money for the party to provide resources to the candidates, like cheaper mail programs, digital ads, stuff like that. And it's important to the future of building a blue Utah because campaigns come and go. Campaigns begin when candidates file to run, and they end after Election Day. So then it's who is responsible for keeping the momentum going, keeping that infrastructure, because the purpose of a campaign, frankly, is to win that campaign, right? Someone running for Cache County Council, their job isn't to turn the entire Cache County blue. Their job is to win that race, where my job is to get Cache County blue. It is to get Grand County blue. It is to make inroads in Utah County, where maybe we don't flip Utah County, but we are inching closer and closer to that 50% threshold.
Yeah. Awesome, yeah. And that's kind of how I thought about it too, is, a lot of the normal candidates and that kind of thing, they just have to focus on their race, whereas the chair and the vice chair, they really focus on the entire state and all of the elections. So it's a much more, widespread and powerful position than I think people think. Moving on to the next question, I just kind of wanted to give some context for what's been happening recently on campus. I mean, I probably should have mentioned this. You are the former president of the Weber State Democrats here.
Yep.
And I think you were the president around when it was basically at its height, right?
Yeah, we had about a list of 250 folks. We tried to make sure that during the fall, every Saturday, we'd have anywhere from 10 to 30 people out knocking doors, making calls. And that definitely was not due to me, but due to the amazing board I had and the presidents that came before me that kind of built it. I just kind of inherited that and kept it going.
I don't know exactly what the club under your leadership kind of participated in, or when you were the member, but basically we have been doing something of like protests, especially this last one. The first kind of thing we did, post-election was that anti-Trump kind of protest/table, which you actually became and attended. We were handing out, these flyers with information about the election, about Trump's policies and that sort of thing, trying to just kind of correct the information that I guess was lost on people, which allowed him to win, I think, and also just about maybe some of the things you could expect from him and the importance of electing Democrats, under his presidency, in the midterms, and to, vote a different way in the next presidential election. So I thought that was very important to kind of get that across. But then, a little bit before that, I was at a table from this group called the Young Americans for Freedom, and they were at the club fair, and we got to talking, kind of debating a little bit about, trans rights and all that kind of stuff. And they brought up that they were going to do an anti-trans table on the Trans Day of Remembrance. So literally the day dedicated to remembering trans people who either got murdered or they committed suicide, just obviously because of their mental health, contributed to by this, transphobia that is very prevalent and being propagated on the right. So I thought that was just disgusting, and I kind of wanted to have some kind of response to that. So I eventually, I had a lot going on, but I tried to verify the information. We set up a counter protest, and that's why, we were there, chanting. Jude was a crucial part of that.
Youths Against Freedom or whatever the hell, they had a month to put together their wimpy little trifold with like notebook paper and pencil. And I know for a fact, okay, not for a fact, but I'm pretty sure that the reason it looked like that is because you confirmed with them and you texted them and they panicked. And I think they were like, we can't do the transgenderism one is bullshit or people are going to cancel us. So they threw together something with plausible deniability. I went to their source website and I spent 5 hours on it trying to figure out where the hell they got all of that. I found it eventually, but it was about intersex surgeries on babies. Like that was the main thing that they were referencing when they were cyberbullying you on Instagram later.
This kind of all leads into the discussion of, the kind of incendiary rhetoric that kind of was, thrown around there. I mean, we had Tessie saying stuff like, this is our one day we have to remember our trans people that got murdered or committed suicide, fuck you and all that kind of stuff. And I also posted on Instagram, it was just a video of them. They were saying, shut the fuck up. And one of them, or I later found out that he wasn't actually officially affiliated with the group.
Yeah, but they let him sit with them. They let him sit with them. I that's very important. You can claim that he doesn't stand with you as much as you want, but he was there the whole time. Nobody bothered to kick him out. So, yeah. He
put his hand in one of our members' face like this, just trying to instigate violence in some way. And they were also literally went up to several trans women and was like, "You're a man, you're a man, you're a man." It was just disgusting what they were doing. So I filmed a video and I was like, these clowns are trying to protest, trans rights on the Trans Day of Remembrance and that sort of thing. And on it I said, deplorable Trumpers or something like that. And, I just kind of wanted your thoughts on that because I think at this point in time, it is justified to say things like that. And I think that for the longest time, Republicans, they've been just battering us with baseball bats and knives, and we've just had kid gloves on, just trying to, fight on a completely different playing field. And I feel like now we really should hone in on, if they're going to call, trans people, disgusting and call them by their non-preferred gender or all this kind of thing, I think that we should call out the fascists for what they really are. We should, in some instances, call them deplorable, call them other things. I mean, deplorable, honestly, I think that's a nicer term compared to what someone could say. So I just kind of wanted your thoughts on that and kind of going forward messaging of the Democratic Party and that kind of thing.
Yeah, I think it's something that we're really looking at, especially the results of this past election, where I think Democrats work very hard to be right, and Republicans work very hard to win. And when I was the president of the Weber State Democrats, we never really focused too much on what the Republicans were doing. We focused on what we were doing to help kind of grow and build, because when we did tabling, the purpose of the tabling wasn't so much to get a reaction from the other side or to prove to them that they were wrong, because they're never going to come to that conclusion. It's letting other Democrats on campus or left-leaning students on campus know that they're not alone. And that was more what we did when we were tabling. I think what I always look at is there's a balance in the party, and I feel like there's always been a balance in the Democratic Party between activism and organizers, and so I think we need to look at Rosemary Lesser's seat, and if you look at that seat that covers Weber State, we lost it by 309 votes in District 10, and she actually got Republicans voting for her. I think Harris did Harris did a few points worse than Rosemary did. So that means that there were people that voted for Trump that also voted for Rosemary Lesser. So it's a larger conversation of, okay, what does the messaging do to help get Democrats elected at the end of the day? I mean, we all want good policies, and that comes by one thing, and that's electing Democrats. We see it. We saw it with Social Security. We saw it with Medicare and Medicaid. We saw it with the largest amount of rights given to the LGBTQ community. That is given to us by electing Democrats. So how can we elect Democrats? I think deplorables isn't necessarily the way to go about it. I don't know if there's a silver bullet that allows us to win these races and message. But something that was always interesting that I found when I ran this club, and also now being the vice chair of the state party, is the messaging that one group says that has the title Democrat. It impacts all of those, national, state, local clubs. So it's kind of, we all have to be on the same message. Mm-hmm. And there's been a lot of times that the national party has had to get involved because the state party kind of went awry on the messaging. And so, I personally don't think that's the message to go about it. I think there's a way of showing those that are disenfranchised that we support them without having to label the other side as deplorables, because all that's going to do is rile up the other side and increase the vitality.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would say to that is when you look at the Trump voters and you look at Rosemary Lesser's race, it's like, I commend her, and I'm probably one of the biggest Rosemary Lesser fans in this college. She's done a lot with us and that sort of thing. But one thing that I think going forward, whether, it's her running again or whichever candidate for District 10, I think that there needs to be some clarity that you can't just sort of run on optimism and just your own record, because I feel like when you look at the other side, when you look at what they're doing, it's kind of like saying, oh, well, look at all these good things we can do, or the news saying, okay, we're all reporting on all of this good stuff happening, but there's, level 5 hurricane coming. We're not going to warn you about that. We're not going to talk about all the devastation that this could cause. And I think that is such a rallying message, is to say, look at all these terrible things that this other candidate supports and could do, and that sort of thing. And I think that the language is just one part of that. I don't necessarily support this sort of labeling literally everyone as deplorables and that kind of thing. When it comes to people literally pointing out trans women and being like, you're a man, I think that there is some justification there to kind of fight back. And I also think when it comes to Trump, a big appeal of him was that he wasn't PC. It was that he said what was on his mind. And I think that, with Democrats, we can actually take that in a way and say what's on our minds, but not in a way that demeans these communities, but in a way that that strengthens us and empowers us by, going after rhetorically the people who are literally trying to exterminate them. These are the people saying that transgenderism is a disease that needs to be eradicated. It's like, well, what does that mean? They're literally talking about committing a genocide against trans people, and you see this in their rhetoric and what they do, contributing to the trans, suicide epidemic, and then they do it on the day to commemorate that. So, I mean, I think that that's very true. I think there is some truth in what you're saying, but at the same time, it's like, look at what Jill Cofer did. I mean, I'm certain that this was associated with her campaign, although I don't think that that's 100% verified. How that guy, I think his name was Brandon Downs or something, he left that paper on a bunch of people's doorsteps who. Mm-hmm. It wasn't even like a targeted canvassing campaign. He literally left it on everyone's doorstep, my doorstep specifically as well, which said, she supports putting men in girls' bathrooms. She supports, men in girls' sports. She supports raising taxes, all these lies. And he didn't necessarily insult her per se or say that she was a deplorable or what have you. But as you could see in the Jill Cofer campaign's messaging, it was much more aggressive, much more partisan, much more divisive than what Rosemary had, and we lost, unfortunately.
Well, and I'd push back a little bit on this. They went low, so we have to go low, and I think this is a problem that we see a lot in the party is when we lose an election, we have to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and we've got to remember that in 2020. Trump was on set to win, and it was a strong pro-economic kitchen tables issue message that got President Biden elected. In the 2022 midterms, it was supposed to be a red wave year. That wasn't the case, and it was because Democrats focused on economic messaging and kitchen table issues. Where I think we went awry this year is we couldn't just rely on the kitchen table pro-economic issues because of inflation. Inflation just got too high. It lasted for too long, and people were like, "You had 4 years. We needed something different." Mm-hmm. So I'm hesitant to say, "Oh, because Trump did A, B, C, and D, that means we must do A, B, C, and D." And I don't think that's the case. And I think when you look at races, so in the party, I look at races, and if a candidate wants to be a bit more vocal on that type of stuff in, say, the Avenues or Sugar House in Salt Lake City that is a D plus 20, meaning that a Democrat should get 60% regardless, just running as a Democrat, they should get 60%. That's fine. What I've loved about the Democratic Party, and this is what I've always told people, is you can have Joe Manchin and you can have Nancy Pelosi running under the same party, under the same banner, in the same year, and there's not this litmus test that you see with the Republicans. And that's the case with Rosemary Lesser, and how impressive it really is that she lost with 49% of the vote is they drew this district to be an R+6 district. That means just being a Republican, you should get 53% of the vote just by being a Republican. And Rosemary was able, in a year where the country shifted 6 points to the right, she was able to move an R+6 district 4 points to the left. Mm-hmm. That's remarkable.
Well, I mean, yes, and I think this was the first election after they added Riverdale and that sort of thing. Isn't that right? Or was that in 2022?
It was in 2022
okay.
that Riverdale and Washington Terrace were included in that district.
Yeah. So, I mean, all I'd say to that is I think that's all valid points, and I agree with much of what you said. I think it is very important that we have this broad party and that kind of thing. But I think the fact that unfortunately, she did underperform her 2022 margin. There's much more people that came out in presidential years and that sort of thing. And I think that's also some commentary is that now going forward, due to the trends, they're expecting Democrats to do better in midterms and Republicans to do better in presidential elections, when previously it seemed like that was flipped kind of in the Obama era and that kind of thing. But I think that whole economic point, in some ways, that kind of vindicates what I've been thinking in the aftermath of the election, because you saw Kamala Harris running on hope and change, basically, trying to kind of recreate what Obama did, I think, in 2008 in many ways, and running on these kind of some kind of economic populist ideas, what was it, like $50,000, tax write-off for, small businesses and that kind of thing, $6,000 tax credit for parents for their child's first year of life and that kind of thing. And I think that leaning on that as much as she did, it just did not work because of where Americans were on the economy. And when you look at all of the other countries where the incumbents lost, that sort of thing, saying, okay, I know the economy isn't the best right now, even though in many ways it's the best economy we've had in half a century. Relying on that didn't work, and that kind of made me think that maybe they should have stuck with more of what Biden was doing. because Biden was very defensive on the economy, said in many ways we have the best economy in 50 years. We need to do more to stop inflation. But the centerpiece was Trump is a threat to democracy. He wants to be a dictator on day one. He wants to weaponize the Department of Justice, national abortion ban, Project 2025, all that. And I feel like that kind of fell to the wayside when it switched to Harris. And I think that was a mistake now looking back on it. And there was more incendiary rhetoric, I'd say, under Biden. Yes, he was doing worse in the polls under, when it was him versus Trump. But I think it's more complex than that. I think that really was due to his age, being more so associated with the economy. But even if it was Harris, I just think that this whole, pivoting to something that we can actually win on I think that is the winning message. And, just think about how you would want someone to run against Adolf Hitler. What was it, like the 1932 election? Because I think there's many parallels, the Great Depression, all this economic turmoil that allowed them to kind of, look towards a strong man and elect, seats for the, the Nazi party, and then eventually ending up with where it was, which was Hitler and the Holocaust and that kind of thing. If they would have focused more on attacking him on those actual threats and calling him out for who he is and what that whole entire party was, I feel like they would have had a better chance, and I feel like we would have as well in this past election.
Yeah, and I think something that, again, Democrats love to do that Republicans are a bit better at is waiting a little bit to see what really happened before we start making judgments. And that's not to say that mistakes weren't made. Mistakes absolutely were made this year because it was a red wave type year, but we have to dig really deep into the data. We have to look at the messaging that worked for Trump in the Latino community, and with men, even with the women. There's a lot more we have to dive into, and I think what I'm hesitant about as a Democratic Party is to not. We're very emotional right now, and I think it is okay to feel our feelings, but we can't have this very emotional, raw state that a lot of Democrats are in the country right now decide how we're going to message and present ourselves for the next 4 years. I think we have the holidays. Let's look and see when we have all the data, when we can look at everything before we start saying if Harris would have done A, then this would have happened, or if Biden would have stayed in, because I hear that all the time, and I don't think anyone knows right now what could have gotten us to that win.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is a fair point. We do need to look into more, and I would definitely say I am in many ways emotional. I'm just kind of angry about what happened and very fearful about the future, honestly. Not to say that I'll stop fighting. If anything, that just influences me to fight harder and, that sort of thing. And I think you saw the outrage after his election in 2016, and then you saw what happened in 2018. So in many ways, I'm more optimistic, but in many ways I'm not, because I know he's going to try to weaponize the Department of Justice and do his anti-democracy kind of schemes and that kind of thing. Did either of you have anything you wanted to add to all this kind of thing? Maybe what could have done better, or what you guys think about kind of the messaging? What kind of route do you think we should take, if any, at this point?
I think we're still kind of treating it like it's a baseball game to be won, like red versus blue. Because before, the term like it's just politics was absolutely valid. We were all trying to get to the same point of improving our lives, just with different ideas of how to do it. Mm-hmm. But a lot of things are being thrown to the wayside for the sake of economy, and the idea of like peacefully like debating that kind of stuff, like bureaucratically, kind of like that. Why? What's the point? We made all of this up. The economy, we made it up. All of these systems, we made them up. We could easily just like flip them over and try something else, but we're still trying to cling to this hope that like things will go back to the way they were. Historically, civilizations only last about 250 years. America's going on 287, and look where we're sitting now. I know that we didn't have the internet when like the Roman Empire fell and everything, but I just feel like that on top of like everything that we're seeing is I feel like we should try a little bit harder to have like, you know, actual change instead of just like fighting over these seats so that maybe we can do something or try harder next time or have a better strategy. Like the strategy's already there. We can do whatever we want. We could overturn these things that are oppressing people, but we still have hope that the cops are going to do things. We still have hope that the hospitals are going to start treating people better. Like, and it's just not happening. It's not going to happen the way things are going. It never really has.
So you're saying more like run on a more bold progressive agenda and kind of just like don't mince any words about it. Just kind of go full swing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just thinking of something that. Sorry, I need to put my mouth here. No, I've just been thinking about the deplorables, comment that you made earlier, I guess.
But not just me, Hillary Clinton said that.
Okay, sure.
and she lost over it.
Yeah.
Well, on top of that, like they were huge cowards about it too. Like we know that they're cowards. They're just banking on these systems working for them because they know them, and Trump was a TV personality. Like he knows how to rile people up. He ran The Bachelor. I love trash TV. A lot of people love trash TV. It's fun to watch people yell at other people. And that we've turned politics into the bread and circuses that is supposed to distract us from politics. And I don't think that's very good. I don't have much else to say on that. I'm just pointing it out.
I think that's a fair point.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess it is a lot of just, bread and circuses, whatever, but I feel like a word like deplorables at least kind of has less of a, known meaning. It's just kind of wide ranging on what that could mean. It's like you're stupid about this group of people or this group of people, whatever. I feel like stuff like fascism, like calling people fascists, and even, lighter side of things, calling people just straight up weird. Like, things that have more of a meaning, I guess. I feel like deplorable is just a little too wide.
I mean, the only thing I'd say is, yes, Hillary Clinton did use that term to your credit, and she did lose. I don't know if I would say she lost over it or that this kind of rhetoric kind of sunk her campaign, because as you know, Trump won the popular vote this time. 2016, she won the popular vote. She even... I think in some states she actually did better than Obama did in 2012, particularly in some of the bluer states, because there was this repudiation of Trump, just saying, look at this candidate and that sort of thing. And I think that was kind of honed in on in 2016. I think in some ways better than 2024. Like you say, we do have to go into this kind of, the data after the fact. And obviously the data we have right now is a little sparse and that kind of thing. But I will say that... calling them fascists and that kind of thing, which Kamala Harris did say, I don't know if I buy that saying that Trump is a fascist and by extension everyone who votes for him is a fascist. I'm not sure, or no, that everyone who votes for him is supporting a fascist, which you can make your own conclusions about that. I'm not sure how that's less incendiary than saying that half of all Trump supporters are deplorables, which, let's be honest, is pretty much true. And I'd also say that I think if you're running in politics and you think something is true but you don't say it for political reasons, I think that's the contradiction we're running into, where we're like, why is Trump winning? Why is he getting the Latino community? Why is he getting all these kind of votes? Look at what he said. Well, that's the point. Look at what he said and look at what these other politicians won't say. Look at how Kamala Harris honestly came off as more of just some politician that, flip-flopped on some positions, which she did. Obviously I supported Kamala, but there are some negative sides of it that made Trump come on top and seem more real. I think at the very least, that's what we should be focusing on, is coming off as real, not being so overly PC. And we could talk about this, going forward, where I think it's more of an issue on the further left side, kind of how they are as far as that goes. But yeah.
Well, and I think the Electoral College and the popular vote is a perfect example of Democrats wanting to be right versus Republicans focus on winning. We can all pat ourselves on the back that in 2016 that Hillary Clinton won the popular vote, but at the end of the day, anyone who knows the game and plays the game, it's a game, but the election is you win with the electoral vote, you don't win with the popular vote. There's no consolation prize winning the popular vote, and I think with kind of what we need to be doing moving forward. Again, I think we need to just kind of wait to see what the data shows, and with how Trump won, I think, and again, we have to wait for the data, but my reservation is I think Trump's playbook of winning only works for Trump. To Jude's credit, he is a TV show personality that we have grown up with our entire lives, those of us here. The Donald Trump playbook, I'm hesitant to say that it applies to any candidate.
Yeah.
Well,
Mitt Romney
Kamala would not have pulled that off. Hillary Clinton would not have pulled that off.
And even on the same side, Mitt Romney could not have pulled that off. John McCain could not have pulled that off.
Well,
I would have loved to see that, though.
Yeah, it would have been nice to see, Mitt unplugged.
Yeah.
But, so I think we can't look at what worked this election or what worked for Donald Trump, because I don't believe that it applies across the board. We have to look at, how did Obama win? How did Biden win? And I think it's, to Jude's point, more populist talking points. There's a lot of criticism of President Biden on the right and even on the left. Joe Biden is the most progressive president we have had in mine and my parents' lifetime. Not since LBJ have we seen a president pass more progressive agenda, and also to note, with the smallest majority in the Senate and the House.
Yeah.
So I think we need to look at to Biden, to Obama as, okay, what was their path? Because clearly that is the playbook Democrats can win.
Yeah. I mean, just one thing I would say as far as that goes, that it's not really been done on the left. I would actually push back a little bit, and it's actually funny because we recently did in my U.S. history from basically Reconstruction to now, and we were going over the Bill Clinton years. And as you know, and obviously I wouldn't be caught dead trying to justify it, but everything with the Monica Lewinsky scandal and everything with Bill Clinton, his approval rating was, sky high around that time. Yes, the economy was good, but at the same time, Bill Clinton wasn't this polished, politician. And in many ways, that's why he won, was how charismatic he was how genuine he kind of came off. Just some lowly governor from Arkansas who had the balls to challenge George H.W. Bush when it looked like, after the Gulf War and the economy was, good, there's no way he could lose. Then, of course, we saw how that ended up playing out. So I think Bill Clinton is something of an example. And I think, what you guys are saying is very true. Like, Trump was a TV personality. So in many ways that allowed that kind of rhetoric and kind of, clownish actions, which also Biden called Trump a clown in the 2020 debate, which I think kind of goes to what I'm saying. But also, as far as that goes, there is kind of there is an opening for someone like Bill Clinton, who, was playing the saxophone and going on MTV and all that kind of thing, how he kind of did harness something similar to what Trump had. And I'd say Obama in some ways too. there's a lot more to it than I think some people are kind of reading into.
Well, and I think Trump is tapping into anger for sure, frustration, but I wouldn't say that Bill Clinton and Obama were the same. I think you can be professional, polished, even PC, but it's also being personable, and that's what Bill Clinton was. He was personable, and the Monica Lewinsky thing, that was after he was in his second term. The Republicans technically won that, but that's to be determined. We'll never know what happened in Florida in the 2000 election. But so I think we still need someone personable. I mean, even Biden in 2020, I don't know if it's necessarily the statements he said in the debate. It's, Joe Biden gave off this vibe of the concerned father and grandfather that we all have or wish we had, that was going to come in and take care of the country after the crazy uncle was left babysitting the kids. I feel like that's what we've got to trigger and harness, because we did beat back Trump in 2018 in the midterms. We did beat back Trump in 2020. So we made some ground. We've lost it. Now it's okay. What did we do in 2018 that worked? Because clearly it worked against the Donald Trump playbook. And what did we do in 2020? Because clearly that worked in going up against the Donald Trump playbook that we didn't do in 24. And again, there was inflation. There were other components of it. But yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting look that we're going to have to do it as Democrats.
And I mean, I think those are all fair points. This is the last thing we've kind of been, it's a very emotional and I'd say very interesting topic and a conversation I think we all need to have of how to move forward and that kind of thing. So one thing I will say is I think in 2018 it's very interesting because I think around that point people were saying there's no way Trump's going to lose re-election because of how the economy was going and that kind of thing. Yes, he was unpopular, mostly I think due to his positions on social issues and just kind of his erratic behavior and all that kind of thing. But at the same time, Democrats did very well in the 2018 midterms, and I'd say in many ways that is because this kind of repudiation of Trump that I'd like to see, that I think we did see in many ways with the messaging of the Biden campaign in 2024, just because of the times. And I think it shifts, not to say that the truth necessarily shifts, but the strategy and what you want to emphasize, I'd say shifts depending on how the economy is going. And I'd say if the economy is going good, and that is in a way, or the economy is going bad in a way that benefits Republicans, then I think we need to start focusing on some other issues because unfortunately, as much as we try, and I think this is what Biden was trying to do, change the narrative on the economy, unfortunately, it really just did not seem to work, and it didn't seem that really anything could really change that for the better. But so I kind of just wanted to kind of went through a few of them. So what would you say? Let's go back to just Utah specifically. What would you say about kind of the performances that our candidates had across the board? Where, from your analysis after the fact, where would you say Democrats kind of did just as well as they did in the previous election, and what places did they do a little bit worse? What places kind of stuck out with you?
What I've been telling folks is that we saw a Republican shift in the country's voting trend by 6 points. There were 2 states in the country that actually saw a leftward shift, meaning that they performed better than they did in 2020. And that was Washington State by, I think, about 3 points. And Utah was actually the only other state to shift leftwards. I think that is very promising because I think it goes to show that the Donald Trump and the Trump narrative doesn't resonate with Utah Republicans, whether that's Mormon voters, whether that's your Mitt Romney, George Bush Republicans that just don't like the rhetoric that's being said, or the culture wars that the Republicans continue to push. So that was really exciting. I think if we look even more narrow scope into counties, Weber County, we unfortunately saw that loss in House District 10. However, if you look at House District 10 the way it was originally in Ogden and South Ogden, which is how it has always been, we actually would have won that seat. It was due to Republicans gerrymandering Riverdale and Washington Terrace that we really saw that increase in Republican turnout that we didn't see in the midterm. Mm-hmm. I also think we have, and I think Weber County is going to be the prime example of what happens when we have fair maps. That, knock on wood, that's going to be something we're going to experience in 26 is fair maps. That means Ogden, that is a blue area. Ogden did vote for Kamala Harris. We are going to see, instead of Ogden being split 5 different ways, we could see 2 districts solidly in Ogden City. Some areas that also gave me hope was Carbon County, an area that used to be very, very blue. It was 2016 that it shifted to the right, and we've slowly been trying to get it back. We had 2 very competitive seats in Carbon County that we lost by 45%. But in Davis County, we flipped a school board seat. We had a Democrat that was running on pro-education, pro-teacher messaging, and they ended up beating out a very prominent Republican. And we ended up flipping that seat by 92 votes. Some areas that bring me some concern is Summit County and Grand County have always been Democrat counties, very Democrat. We did see them shift a little bit more to the right. There was a very competitive county council seat in Summit County that we did end up winning. I think it was about 52%. And Grand County, we held on to our county council seat, but we won it by 10 votes. So those are areas that I don't think that those 2 counties are indicators that they are going to go red. But I think it is a warning sign that if the Democratic Party takes these counties for granted, we don't continue to build our infrastructure there, we could see a few more seats slip.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that's, obviously some of that is promising, with it shifting to the left, actually. And that was actually the only thing that kind of vindicated something I predicted. Is I was like, I think Harris will do better than Biden in Utah. And it is looking, and I know at first it looked like she was going to do like a few points better than him. Now it looks like it'll be like 0.5% or something like that. Which obviously that's not massive, but I think it does say something when you have all these states shifting by, like, I think some of the blue states, like didn't New York, I kind of horrified, I can't even fully dive into the results even yet, but didn't New York, like, it was under 10 points, like it was like 5 or 6?
Yeah, and even a 0.5 point with Harris, Kamala Harris still was the best performing Democrat in Utah for president since Lyndon Johnson in 1964, before my mom was born. So, I mean, even though it's a 0.5%, it is still a record set by, almost 60 years. Mm-hmm. So, I think that was promising. And if I can also talk about another state, Montana, that a lot of people aren't talking about, but Montana's a red state. Unfortunately, we lost the U.S. Senate seat, John Tester, in that area. But in their state house, they actually gained 10 seats in the Montana State House, and a lot of folks are saying, wow, that is a huge shift. What was the difference in 2022 versus 2024? And what had happened was Montana just went through a fair maps redistricting. So when the Republican legislature didn't get to pick the districts, but instead an independent commission drawing fair maps, Democrats actually gained 10 seats. So I think that is very promising for us heading into a midterm that historic indicators would show is going to be a blue wave midterm. with fair maps, I think Utah has some real opportunities to make gains and work to try to get out of the super minority in the House and the Senate.
And for anyone who may not know, how about you kind of go over the recent striking down of Amendment D and why that might kind of give you hope that we will have some fair maps? I think it is important to note that in 2018, Utah voters did pass an initiative that would have allowed an independent redistricting commission to actually draw the districts. The Republican supermajority legislature, they just said, no, we don't want to deal with that. We just want to gerrymander all of the federal and state legislative districts. So, yeah.
So a quick Utah history lesson from yours truly. Exactly what Ethan said. In 2018, we passed this ballot initiative where an independent commission would draw districts, and those districts could not be drawn based off of partisan makeup. The Utah legislature changed it where they said, well, we can also draw our own maps, and we will decide whether or not we want to go with this independent commission map or the maps that we drew. Hopefully it's no surprise to those listening that they went with the maps that they drew, that were gerrymandered. And so what ended up happening was we had a court ruling that said that it is unlawful to have the legislature do what they did and disregard the independent maps. Mm-hmm. And so Amendment D was kind of created last minute. It was truly, it was in the middle of the Democratic National Convention week that Republicans passed putting Amendment D on the ballot, which basically was a scare tactic that said that would have allowed them to do that. And because it was it would be an update to the Constitution, the Utah Supreme Court would have to abide by it. But what they did wrong was they put wording in that amendment that was pure fear-mongering and not factual whatsoever. And so a lower court ruled that Amendment D had to be voided. So those that are listening that say, well, hold on, I did see Amendment D on my ballot. What ended up happening was the court said, look, we're not going to have the lieutenant governor and all the county clerks reprint new ballots because that would cost millions of dollars. Some ballots had already been mailed out to those overseas. So they just ruled that Amendment D would be voided. So no county clerks were allowed to count the results of Amendment D at all. So if you voted for or against Amendment D, your vote didn't count because the court said it had to be voided because the legislature tried to pull a fast one on the voters.
Mm-hmm. And do you think that could lead to the maps being redrawn? Like, would the Republican supermajority be obligated to do that, or is that just something that if the court makes more rulings, maybe that could happen?
So this is where it's a little murky, and I'm definitely not the best person to discuss what's happening next. But my understanding is that if the Utah Supreme Court's ruling is upheld, which it is looking like it will be, that the independent commission two options will occur. Either one, the Utah legislature will be able to pick of the three maps that the independent commission drew back in 2021. They will be able to pick from them, or a new independent commission will be created. They will draw maps and the legislature will pick from them.
Okay.
And that would affect our federal maps. So we would see fair congressional maps, which means that we probably will have a Democrat leaning or a pure toss-up congressional district that will be in Salt Lake County. Mm-hmm. And it will also mean fair maps at the local level, meaning State House, State Senate.
Okay, awesome. So next of all, I just kind of wanted to have you guys chime in and say kind of what are some of your reservations about the Democratic Party? I know that some of the members, when they hear, oh, the Weber State Democrats, they're like, I'm more left than a Democrat. I don't belong in that club, or I don't want to go to their meetings, or, they support Israel too much, or they are too into capitalism and all that kind of stuff. What would you guys say is your problem kind of with the Democratic Party? Then I'd like to hear Oscar kind of say, what he'd say in response to any of those kind of reservations.
Do you want to go first?
Okay. So you know how Bernie Sanders was like legendarily progressive? In Germany, he would have been considered a little bit left of center. And that's kind of what the Democratic Party has been doing, is slowly moving right to meet up with the now fascist Republicans. Way back when, again, there used to be like actual debate happening, but we're still trying to use those same methods in a very, very different political climate. So I don't think that any of maybe the gerrymandering matters, but at the end of the day, we could easily just like stop all of the fighting on this and then just go down and get people to just do the stuff. Like, we can just organize people to do the stuff that we need to do. Like if the majority of the state agrees on something, we don't necessarily need to vote for if we should put the ballot or put it on the ballot and then wait for the bill. And then maybe the Republicans will possibly let us try it. And like, it's a whole lot of like bureaucracy and patience that I just do not have for the system anymore. The system has never worked for me. And the education system on top of that, when I was in elementary school, and this is the only time I ever learned about the Trail of Tears, they told me that the Native Americans left after we asked them politely, right? And that's disgusting, but that was when Obama was the president. So obviously something is going wrong there. We do not at this time have the power to change that. But personally, I think that people are inherently good. I think everybody does inherently want what is best for everybody, but we are in an economic system that rewards psychopathic behavior, right? And we're in an economic system that rewards that kind of psychopathic behavior, where if you take advantage of people, then you can become a billionaire. If you become a billionaire, then you have as much power as you could possibly want. And that has always been the case. We're just not as distracted by it anymore because it has gotten to a point where the economy is failing. And because the economy is failing and billionaires don't want to give up their money for the trickle-down economic system that we were promised, they need to come up with a scapegoat. And that scapegoat is literally everybody that is different from them. Yeah. Everyone that's different from the rich people. And there's just no saving it at this point. I really don't think there is. Bureaucracy only serves to make us feel better about getting our voice out there and then waiting for people to agree with us.
I think my biggest gripe, I guess, is, there is an excuse, of course, that it's extremely difficult and whatever to get voting reform in place, but I feel like it's very similar to her, complaints about how the system is. It's like capitalism ruins whatever, something like that, but it's two-party system completely ruins things, and there has to be more of the system has to be built in a way where, it doesn't inherently, have two parties or, a third party, and you can just throw away your vote for whatever level of government it is. I guess it's not quite as extreme with, capitalism itself is bad, but it's still like, maybe it's dangerous for like the Democratic Party itself, because, there's a whole lot of extreme leftists who just have to, put down their gripes, I guess, just vote along the lines. I guess that's my gripe.
I think I appreciate the two of you sharing that. The point of a broken two-party system, my wife and I have that debate constantly. She would love 5 political parties. And I tell her, I say, you're married to the vice chair of the Utah Democratic Party, and she says, "I know, we still need 5 parties." So you and my wife would get along great. I can't say that there's not frustration in the system. I think any type of government, you're guaranteed one thing, and that's frustration. For me, and I really had to look deep. After this election, I thought, am I wanting to run for another term as vice chair? What is the point right now? And the point for me, and I can only speak for myself here, is my father's an immigrant. My mom is gay. I have a strongly opinionated wife and a daughter on the way. How can I sit to the side and let these people come into power and continue to push the narrative? I'm a firm believer of perfect can't be the enemy of progress. That's not to say that there haven't been mistakes made. I think the Democratic Party is the longest living party in American politics, and we do not have the best history. I would not be a Democrat of the 1860s. I would not be a Democrat during Reconstruction. But what we have done is continued to move further to the left on because we are the party that provided Social Security, which was considered the largest government overreach of our time. FDR's policies were considered socialist, even though they were far from it. Anyone who has studied different thoughts of government and political thought would know that it was not socialist, but it got us out of economic travesty. We had a Southern Democrat in the White House that passed the largest civil rights acts. A Southern Democrat going against everything he was taught and lost friends over it. We then saw Jimmy Carter bringing up this idea of solar panels on the White House and taking care of the environment, which was a crazy idea, to now having Joe Biden, who has passed the largest pro-environment agenda we have seen in any administration. So, are we where I would like to be? No, far from it. I'm not shy to say some of my biggest gripes is Obama, who was elected in 2008, had a super majority in the Senate and the House. They could have passed anything. And we got Obamacare, which saved my mom's life, truly. My mom would not be here today had it not been for Obamacare and her having insurance due to a pre-existing condition. That was life-changing. We didn't hear a word on immigration reform. Again, when we had Democrats controlling everything, and not just controlling, but super majorities, a filibuster-proof majority in the Senate. And we didn't hear anything about immigration reform until after we lost the House in 2010. So I totally understand those frustrations, and I try very hard to make sure folks know that those frustrations are valid. For me, how I'm able to get up every day and put this suit on and continue to go to the office and fight for Democrats that I may differ on some policies is, and I mean this sincerely and not to be vindictive or to sound snarky, but what's the alternative? And maybe someone can enlighten me, because I don't know what the alternative is other than fighting. James Carville said, after this election, we are an opposition party. And that is exactly what we are.
Yeah.
What if instead of, because the people who have picked a side have already picked a side, like we can educate them on this kind of, like we can educate them on human rights all we want. What if we focused more on educating people on how the system actually works? Because it genuinely sounds like it is purposely set up to be as complicated as possible for the layman. I should not need a poli-sci degree to understand what your job is, because I'm not going to lie, I still don't know what you do. It sounds like a manager. I'm pretty sure it's just a manager.
And my mother-in-law says the same thing. I've had to explain to her what I do probably a dozen times now. And I think that's fair, to try to simplify it. But I think there's more to that. I think it's not just that the system's complex or that the way we explain it is complex. I think the average voter, or the average American for that matter, is trying to keep food on their table, lights on, maybe one day own a house.
Yeah.
They have so many things that are real life obstacles that they are facing right now. Learning the checks and balances of government and what a filibuster-proof majority is in the Senate, or what's the difference between their county commissioner and their mayor, is not at the top of their list because they're living to survive.
Well, yeah, they're incredibly disempowered. When people are disempowered, then they're not going to be able to take part in all these different political things, and they're just going to be completely helpless. And that's why the system like this has survived for so long, because people don't know how much power they truly have as an individual. Like, if all the government just disappeared one day, I'd drive the garbage truck. I'd take out the garbage. I would sweep out the gutters. I would love to do all those dirty jobs, because I wouldn't need to I could just stay in my house. There's no lease. I wouldn't need to go to a job. And yeah, in the beginning, people are going to be crazy and go insane. But at the end of it, again, I think people are inherently good and they just want what's best for them. Now, I'm not saying that we can get rid of the government all in one day, but I just think that it's definitely something to keep in mind while we're on this fucking hamster wheel of oh, we're gonna win this time, we're gonna get it, and the progress is just so painfully slow that I don't know if I'm gonna make it 4 years. I was gonna quit cigarettes. I just fucking stopped because I am genuinely convinced that I'm gonna get beat to death in a bathroom over the next 4 years, and I don't have any hope in that kind of stuff. I know that there's not an easy alternative, but playing this game just doesn't seem like the move. It just feels like a game.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about lives here, and unfortunately, I think in our society we pivot stuff to winners and losers, right? It's if you live in a 4,000 square foot house versus a 700 square foot apartment, people assume one's a winner and one is a loser. I think if you are if you drive a certain car, there's winners and losers, and that's what our society has done, and I think that needs to end. That's
a result of the capitalist system.
Yeah, and I don't know what the solution is. I tend to be an advocate for government because if you look at our history in America, it was never a volunteer group that came in and allowed voting rights for African Americans in the South, or allowed gay people to or same-sex couples to get married. That was government acting on behalf of individuals. So,
well, yeah, but the reason that the government acted like that is because there were riots. People got up and they fought for it instead of just sitting around and waiting for people to do something about it. That's the thing.
Sure.
It was direct action that got that started. The first Pride was a riot.
Sure, absolutely. And what became of that was laws that ensured that those that were lynching other folks in trees, that is considered a federal hate crime now.
Yeah. So why don't we just speed run all these? Why don't we just codify these human rights before they get taken away? Why do we need to go through all of why do we need to go through all of this and be patient? Because things are going downhill very quickly. Like it doesn't seem like this method is going to do much except wait for, like, the main thing I'm trying to get at is that getting down and getting dirty, and actually not even that, we need to focus our efforts on other things, like more third spaces, community gardens, things that genuinely like can get people together. We've completely pushed those to the wayside to like make more room for cars and stuff, and like the rent is still high, and so we're working too much, and I can't afford groceries half the time, and the economy's never really worked for me because I've always been poor. Mm-hmm. But what I do know has worked for me is being able to go to the library, which I know would have been shot down if it was brought up today, because free books for like socialists and stuff, that would have been considered insane. But I could go to the library, I could go like to a friend's house to take a shower, but like that kind of stuff wasn't working for me when I was homeless. That's damn near impossible to get out of. And Salt Lake City, I know, has a huge problem with that. I don't know if you have any power over that aspect, but like, I think that if we have to keep like the semblance of government and the two-party system, at the very least, the Democratic Party needs to focus more on like these things that can affect people on the individual level.
It's like, even, I know I'm still on my thing of like, I feel like it is dangerous to the Democratic Party itself, and Democratic, Republican, but people's voices through voting just don't matter enough. Yeah. People like, I feel like it needs to be a strong push on the Democratic Party that I guess voting reform happens, that approval voting happens, or ranked choice voting, whatever, stuff like this. I feel like, especially with Trump being divisive as he was, there's anti-Trump Republicans. My dad's one of them. There's a bunch of them around. I feel like stuff like that kind of helps the case rhetorically. But also, Trump went and he worked like at a McDonald's, and he did one other thing that was like a blue collar job, and I think that's what got a lot of people. Garbage truck.
Yeah, I think that's what got a lot of people on his side, was because he, albeit faked it, but he showed people that he was willing to get down to their level. He wasn't just another guy in a suit, like, trying to uphold this system that they don't even like anymore.
I think the more local and focusing on the issues that affect others is going to be critical to the Democratic Party's success. For other parties, I think if you again look at the history of our country, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party were not the founding parties of our system. In the 1800s, we were constantly shifting different parties. There were the Democratic Republicans, the Federalists, the Whigs, all those. Now, I think what Americans are doing is, instead of starting a third party or starting 5 parties like my wife would want, what they're doing is we're seeing party realignment. And I think that's what we're constantly seeing, and whether people like it or not, we'll probably continue to see, is instead of a third party rising, we're just going to constantly see realignment. And to Ethan's point of people are saying Democrats are going to do better in midterms and Republicans are going to do better in presidentials, that's due to the realignment, where we are seeing more suburban voters shifting to the Democratic Party and more low-income working class people shifting to the Republican Party, because they do like Trump's, albeit vulgar but still populist message, versus Harris and the Democrats that were a bit more, policy driven, right? Yeah. Talking about child tax credits and talking about the environment and all these things that were more policy driven, versus Trump saying, I get you're angry, I'm angry too.
Yeah, and I think just to kind of bring kind of all three of what y'all are saying together, because I definitely resonate with, both sides in many ways. And I think that it is definitely compatible. I think what Jude said about, it just feels like we're just sitting around waiting and that kind of thing. I think that is very true. And then you say, okay, well, what's really the alternative to that? I would say that's very true. And I'd say that there is something of a third option where we do focus on this party realignment. We do say, okay, look, all of you leftists, not just on the other side of this table, but everyone who has ever not wanted to be part of the Democratic Party because they say they don't like the establishment, they don't like how it's going, and the certain politicians who are actually seem to be calling the shots, especially now. Kamala Harris lost. We lost our majorities in the Senate and House, or we didn't win the majority in the House, and we lost our majority in the Senate. There isn't a whole lot of top-down correspondence per se, other than for example, the chairs and that kind of thing, which is why I think those positions are so important. Because even when some of these, national or even state elected positions fall, you have the chairs and you have them trying to pick up the pieces and trying to, set us on the right path. But I will say that, any sort of reservation or thinking the Democrats should focus on this more. They should focus more on individual actions, community gardens, setting up this more, communal society. I think that is very true, and that is what the Democrats can focus on, but that requires us to run as Democrats for office, to advocate for Democrats, to push them for this. And I think it is true that riots and that kind of thing, that brought attention to the civil rights issue that eventually led to the passing of the Civil Rights Act. But in certain instances, if you don't have the right politician in there, that wouldn't have happened. It wouldn't have mattered about the riots unless it literally overthrew the government, which I think is virtually impossible at this point. You'd need to have some semblance of a decent politician in there to actually respond to all of this outrage. So I think it is very true what you guys are saying. Voting can't be our only strategy of making change. We need to advocate, for these things and push both politicians, Republican and Democrat. But the thing is, if it's a Republican in there, our chances of getting anything we want is completely diminished. You see that with, for example, in Obama's presidency. Yes, he should have done a lot more, but after 2010, he literally coined the Republicans the party of no, because they said no to literally everything. So the idea that, it sucks and we should look more towards creating a more communal society, that is true. But the Democratic Party has to be a part of it. And we have to reform the Democratic Party and make it better and more populist and more progressive and more communal. But it can't be pushed to the wayside, because I think that will definitely do more harm than good. And there really isn't another option. And one thing I will say about the third party stuff is I think that is a very fair concern, but at the same time, in other countries, you see third parties, and there has to be a coalition made. So if you have a bunch of different parties, in some ways, it basically always does boil down to two major factions: who supports this legislation and who doesn't. So in some ways, you have a similar issue, if not worse, because then you'd have to say, okay, well, we have to fix this legislation to get the support of this random party who might be liberal in some ways, maybe very far right on social issues or something like that. And you kind of get this kind of discombobulation that when you have the Democratic Party, you could have it be more cohesive, to where if you have a very progressive party, but it's one of many, that's one thing. But if you had the Democratic Party and you fully reformed it, I think that would be much more powerful for change. But yeah.
We could just completely redo everything. It wouldn't be easy, but we could do it. I just don't like the idea of, first of all, very few things have actually been codified. Our rights have been on the line every single election since 2016 because Roe v. Wade wasn't codified. Biden could still do that, by the way. Wait, no, because it got overturned. No one ever codified it. Nobody ever made it so that this thing has to stay in no matter what. And that is something that if you can do that, that's something that you should be focusing on, because we can't be terrified of these people We can't be terrified of these Republicans coming into power and just thinking like, oh, the Democrats are going to be the ones to save us. That's terrifying. That's stressful, and that's why I don't like it. That's why I don't like any semblance of government, because we're just fighting to have power, and that's still power over us. That's still power over other people that nobody should have.
And something that I would mention, and Ethan, listening to you kind of brought this this point to me, and hearing from Jude as well, is a lot of times that we focus on what hasn't been done by Democrats or the government, and I think that's fair. So I was thinking about some state representatives and state senators down at the Utah Capitol that I know very well. And what they tell me is their job almost isn't even to push progressive issues forward. It is their whole goal in that session is try to get all the fascist far right bills out and stop that.
Yeah.
And so, I think there's a lot of, I think a lot of times there's a look at, we aren't here, but we need to also remember we are not there either. And codifying, codifying Roe v. Wade wouldn't put it in stone, because if a Democratic administration and Congress voted for it, codifying it would mean that that a Republican Congress and a Republican president could as easily remove it. But what I think what it's really come down to, and this is a really scary thing, and again, Republicans look more long term, and we have to start looking at that. And I'm really happy that we saw this in Biden's first term, is Republicans have changed the court system. People are wondering, why are these rights being taken away? And it is the court system. The Supreme Court, I'm worried. I'm worried that the Supreme Court will never go back to a moderate shift in our lifetime. And it was the Supreme Court that took away Roe v. Wade. Mm-hmm. It's the Supreme Court that could take away the rights for same-sex couples to get married. They're the ones that took away what Democrat President Johnson passed, which was the affirmative action, and a lot of the DEI policies. That was all done through the Supreme Court. And what I think we're going to see, if we do see rights being taken away, is the Supreme Court, the exact same Supreme Court that granted all of those freedoms, are now, this new Supreme Court is rolling it back.
Yeah, so the system that we're fighting for right now is just playing defensive right now, when in reality we could just throw the whole thing away. Like, that's entirely possible. I know that it's like, I know that it sounds like pandemonium, and it very well might be, but I just don't think anybody is thinking bigger than the system that we have right now. Genuinely, we can go bigger. We don't have to keep playing defensive on this. We can just ignore those bills, I think. I know that you're probably very frustrated hearing this, because you know everything about how the system works and I don't, but there are loopholes in everything. Like, when we were doing the protest, we were sat across the hallway from that table, and we were actually drawing attention towards them, but that was the only place we were allowed to go unannounced. Mm-hmm. I managed to find a way that we could do that, a loophole of sorts. We could get an emergency reservation, and so we moved over there, and we were able to disrupt everything and chase them out. And I know that there's got to be something like that in there, and I think that because we're playing defense so much, that we're kind of ignoring the fact that there is a lot more power we have a lot more power in this.
Yeah,
We just need to be more strategic with it.
And I absolutely agree that there can always be more strategy put into it. I think the worry about tossing it all out is we would also be tossing 200 years worth of laws and rules that are protecting us. Are there subgroups of individuals in this country that have more protections than others? Absolutely. There is no doubt about it. However, there are protections. I mean, again, we can throw it out because we are upset that we don't have these protections, but we're also going to be throwing out protections that are on the books because of the laws that we have and because of the government structure that we have.
And can't we just change that?
Change the laws?
Well, if these bills that you're defending against are fascist laws, then what's to say that you can't just change those? Like, we can't. What do you got? You seem very stressed out.
No, I'm fine. I'm just kind of confused. I just feel like it's kind of a lot that you're trying to, like, it is we the people. We the people have the power to do things,
Absolutely.
whatever. But the system's there. We already have this thing here, and it's too much to try and just like shut it down just like that or whatever.
That's Trump's plan.
Well, I mean, if I may, I think there might be some kind of other way of looking at this that I think could be somewhat enlightening. When you look at this idea of, okay, let's just do away with the government, let's just ignore them and act like they have no power and that kind of thing, it always goes back to the old philosophical debate between Thomas Hobbes, who is saying that, the state of nature, the state, without the state, without the government, it's basically going to be, I think you said life would be, harsh, brutish, and short. And then you have it contrast with, I think it was like John Locke, who says, he more so has the position that humans are inherently good, kind of like as Jude is saying here. And I think that's the debate we have. Honestly, I probably lean more towards Thomas Hobbes, because I do think that, and I think the Republicans are proving this, if given the chance, they will exert complete control over us. They will marginalize us. They'll do to us what they did to the indigenous people of this country. They'll literally commit a genocide against us. They'll do what Hitler did in with the Holocaust and everything. And I think that we need some kind of government to protect us from that. We need some kind of honestly, some kind of police state that should be completely dedicated to preserving our rights and that kind of thing. Because if you don't have that, well, you're going to have a police state and a tyrannical government that is the opposite of what you want. So I think if you do have this kind of anarchist, society and that sort of thing, you're kind of doing yourself a disservice, because then you're allowing yourself to see and to have, these people actually come together and create a tyrannical government. Whereas if we don't have a government in the first place, that allows that to happen. If we do have a government like we do, at least we can have like Democrats fighting back against it, and that sort of thing. And I just always go back to, if every single elected official had your same ideology, what do you think couldn't get done? I think that there's really nothing beyond our capacity. Even if you're just looking at the United States Constitution, there's not a lot of barriers to these progressive ideals. That is at the core of the soul of America, the idea that we all have inherent value, which in many ways was influenced by philosophers like John Locke. There's nothing beyond our capacity when we fully, get together and elect these politicians and fight back against fascism and that kind of thing. So I think that what you two are saying, it's not actually opposed to one another. It's all about how we channel this energy and how we move forward, if that makes sense. And just so you guys know, we should probably start wrapping it up soon, but if you guys have any kind of last closing thoughts on any of this.
I just think thinking outside the box is what we have to do right now.
Yeah.
And for the record, anarchy does not devolve into a police state. I don't know where you got that.
I think it can, in the sense that if you have no government set up, what is to defend against one from arising is basically what I'd say.
Yeah, it's like extreme First Amendment, whatever. Like, you have all the free speech now that there's no one stopping you. I get I don't know. I feel like the ideas you're having are too much to try and implement on, like, government has to be shut down and everyone has to work for each other now, for each other, support each other, everything. But
right now we're putting in even more effort to support billionaires. I don't see why we can't just channel that energy into each other. I don't think people are just going to, like, if you were allowed to murder someone right now, would you?
No, but
I personally wouldn't.
I'm not
Homicidal?
No, I'm not homicidal, but I also am not confident in some of my peers' ability to do that. So in many ways, I am thankful for the government in that I don't think that if we disbanded it, it would be all sunshine and roses. I think there would be blood in the streets. It would be like the Purge movie, just every single day. I think they made it like Forever Purge or whatever. That's what it'd be. Yeah. But I mean, I definitely think that is true, and I think that is something that I'm glad to have that influence and to really be more communal. I think that is incredibly powerful for the Democratic Party. And I think it's a no-brainer to prioritize just sticking up for one another. And even if it's not in a government capacity, just, even it could go back to, the whole ideals behind the Bible, just love thy neighbor, just look out for one another. If someone, needs something, volunteer to help them and that kind of thing.
that's what I was going to say, is just, I think the point is to do that personally and do it so aggressively that it just inspires others to do the same, of supporting others first and foremost, trying to do as much as possible to simply support one another. And, maybe one day, whatever, a perfect non-government state, whatever, can exist, but I think fundamentally it has to begin at individual levels first.
And I mean, I'll just say I've appreciated being on the podcast. I think that there were some good discussions had, and there was disagreement, but what I've told people is that's why I can be a Democrat, is because you can have these hard conversations, these criticisms of the system and the individuals. You don't see that on the other side. You don't see anyone speaking ill about Donald Trump or the Republican Party, even when they were hemorrhaging seats in 2022. And so I think the only way that we're going to be able to move forward in a Trump second term is going to be having these tough conversations. I think the only way that the Democratic Party will be able to grow here in Utah and expand on some of the wins that we saw on election night is going to be to Jude's point, thinking outside the box. And so keep up the great work here at Weber State. Weber State Democrats were critical in us flipping a seat in 2018, and I really look forward to seeing what you guys do in 2026 to help us flip some seats in Weber County.
Of course, and let me just end with this because it came to me because I think it's very applicable, and this is because I'm a philosophy nerd. There's a German philosopher named Hegel, and I think this did precede Marx, and in many ways it kind of inspired Marx's philosophy, but it's a little bit more broad, and it's about the Hegelian dialectic. And so you have a thesis and an antithesis. And in this sort of context, and he says that this is kind of the way throughout history we've gone. So for example, you have one idea, let's say it's the Democrats, and the other idea, it's the Republicans, and they clash, and then out of that, you have a new thesis, and then you have a new antithesis from that, and it just keeps going on and on and on until it gets to the point where the thesis and the antithesis is pretty much the same, right? These disagreements keep on happening, and we keep on, kind of fighting one another until one of them kind of gives in. I guess that's more of like a negative way to put that, but really until we all kind of come to the same understanding. And then at that point, that's when Hegel says we have something like a stateless society, because at that point, then we can actually trust one another to do what is right, because only at that point have we developed enough intellectually, emotionally, all of these kind of things to actually get to that point where we can actually have a just and free society without having to have the government keep us in check. And then our, rights, which I think have been recognized since our very founding, will be recognized. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to leave you guys with that. But thanks again so much for coming on this podcast. We won't be doing a podcast next week because of Black Friday. We may still be doing some club activity. But thank you guys so much for attending. And if any students are watching this that want to join the Weber State Democrats, make sure to send us a message on Instagram, or you can register officially on eWeber. If you want to watch another podcast from us, you can click right here. Thanks.